Hi, and welcome to the podcast Echo. I'm going to err a lot, so I'm going to apologise for that in advance. So this is where we are going to chat about other podcasts and ones that have really resonated with us. And I'm kicking this off. I've actually been listening to a lot of Lewis Raymond Taylor's podcasts recently. In fact, I think I've pretty much listened to all of them now. And they all really resonate. And I think they all really resonate because they're all about adversities to assets. And they're all about how, you know, you're turning the crap that's happened to you in your life into something positive, which is something I know a lot about. So this one particularly resonated with me quite considerably, but also it's one that I think throughout all of Lewis's podcasts, he mentions Dr. Demartini. He comes up quite frequently. And it's really weird, and I know there's a name for it, but I can't quite remember what it is. But since I've listened to this podcast with Dr. Demartini, I've heard his name a lot, in a lot more places than I had ever done before. And there's a thing for it where you hear something, and like, you know, if I mention a pink car and you never see any pink cars, you can guarantee because I've mentioned a pink car, you'll start seeing pink cars. So this one is from the 14th of April, 2023. It is, the original podcast is Lewis Raymond Taylor's Adversities to Assets, and it's called Unable to Speak to Genius from back, Unable to Speak to Genius, that's what it's called, from a, oh my God, Unable to Speak to Genius.
You'll get it in the end.
Get there. Unable to Speak to Genius, Dr. Demartini, and so I gave it to Vish to listen to. Actually, I think it was last week, wasn't it? And then we had this meeting and it had gone all out of my head and we had to reschedule because I'd completely not done what I said I was going to do. But we're here now and that's the main thing. So do you want to start by talking about what you felt listening to the podcast? How did you find it and that kind of stuff?
Yeah, sure. I mean, as first episodes go, it was a really insightful one to begin with. I mean, I've listened to a couple of episodes on Lewis's series from probably well-known more personalities in the wide world, you know, like Katie Price, Gail Porter, this kind of thing. Still as insightful as well on those episodes. But this one, first of all, the title was interesting. Unable to Speak to Genius. And I thought, well, I wonder what this seems to be getting at. Is it indicating that we have genius inside us, but we're at the moment not able to tap into it? Or do we reach a certain realm of being a genius that, you know, we suddenly can't relate or anything like that? But I thought, you know what? Let's just give the episode a listen and see what I make of it, because essentially that's the point of the show. It's not about what was said, it's about what you hear. And for me, there were so many points, and I've got a whole phone load of points that we'll try and cover across the show, where, you know, whether it was a story, an analogy, an example, you know, it made me recall part of my own journey, you know. And the first point that came up for me at the beginning was he was talking about the idea of how judging other people or judging others is inauthentic. Now, he was coming from the perspective of redefining the soul, which was, he used a clever little acronym of soul, of state of unconditional love.
Yes.
Now, I know that might sound a little bit airy-fairy to some people, but I guess his perspective was that when we can reach a place where we're free of judging other people.
Yeah.
Now, whether you think that's, you know, an old principle, and it's like, yeah, you know, that's easier said than done. It's true. A lot of what we encounter like this is not difficult in principle. So when we say, you know, try not to judge other people, then we're like, yeah, that's easy enough to do. But to practice it is the real bit. That's where we all probably are guilty of going, oh, I can't be bothered with that. And it's just too tempting to just be judgeful of someone. But when he was talking about the inauthenticity of it, leads to the exaggeration and the minimal state of self. I think that was a very key point that you first made there, was essentially, it's what I call you reflect what you project. So when you think you're judging other people, you're actually judging yourself. And that actually comes back to the point you made at the very beginning about the pink elephant. That's from the world of NLP, I remember, where it's essentially saying your subconscious and your system can't negate negatives. So if you say don't think of something,
you're going to think of it.
and you'll think of it.
I
Same thing
think,
here. It can't discern when you're judging someone. It's like, oh, you must be judging yourself then.
that's the thing in it. And I now I'm not just saying this. This is absolutely genuine. I started to realise quite a while ago that if something about someone really bugged me, like they really got under my skin, what in that was I see? What in that was myself?
Yeah.
Like, and I'm genuine. I genuinely mean this. Like, there are a couple of people that I'm actually quite close to that I kind of see and I don't see, and I go through phases seeing them quite a lot, and then I don't see them very often. And sometimes they just really get under my skin, and I genuinely had to stop myself and think, hold on a second, they're getting under my skin for a reason, because they're rubbing against something in me that rubs against them. So this is a reflection of me. Now, what is it in me that, do you know what I mean? And
Yeah.
actually,
What's it getting at?
yeah, genuinely, once I figured that out, I found a lot of peace with dealing with a lot of people that used to absolutely rub me up the wrong way. And it's such a valid point. Like, if someone really, really irritates me, it doesn't happen. Honestly, it really doesn't happen very often anymore. If somebody really, really does irritate me, though, I just look inside and I can. It's weird, and it doesn't happen overnight. It just kind of like falls into place. Like, well, hold on a second. What do I do that's like that? Or oh my God, I must be like that towards other people.
So some people might have heard that and go, okay, great. How do I start that? How do you get into that practice? Because you're right. It is the same. It is take a moment and then go, right, what's it actually getting at inside me? But how does one start with that, do you think?
I think when you learn to be present, I think when you learn to be in the moment, because I think not before, when I used to get irritated by other people, I would get irritated and then move on. And I was never really present in the moment and actually looking at what was really going on. It was almost like skimming the surface of the situation rather than being present in the situation. And it was once I started being much more present, like, it doesn't happen overnight. It happens gradually. The first thing that I had to start being more mindful of and being more present with was stopping worrying about what was going to happen in 3 days' time and what happens if that happens, because I can't control what's going to happen and I'm not living there. So that's just ruining today. And do you know what? I'm not a prisoner of my past anymore. And so I refuse to, let that stress. It did for a long time, but I refuse to let that stress me out and hold me back and stop me from doing the things that I want to do, like, this and whatever. And I think when you learn to be present and be in the moment, you learn to look at things from a different perspective. And I think, I'm not saying it is that easy, but I think that's one of the very first steps to acceptance, is being in the moment. Like, now, I am here. I'm here in this, and we're talking about this, and we're talking, and I'm not thinking about anything else. I'm present in this moment, and I think it's important. You have to be really strongly planted in what you've got going on, and I think once you do that, it changes everything. It changes how you look at people, how you look at situations. It reduces your worry about the future. It reduces your stress about the past. And I think that's probably the first step to changing that.
100%. And the fact that we're talking about acceptance as a first starting block is indeed it. So when it comes to whether it's emotions, your states, whatever it might be, it's giving yourself the opportunity to go, okay, the future is something that hasn't happened yet. The past is something that has happened, neither of which you're in control. And again, it might be something you've heard before and you've readily dismissed it, go, yeah, whatever. But it's that practice to us that turns it from, just hearsay to like, okay, this might be actively helping me here. And, a phrase I learned during my journey was the idea of things are simple but not easy. What a lot you hear on these shows is not rocket science. We're not going to uncover some new revolution that's going to change everything. These are things that are probably hidden in plain sight and probably spoken about on these shows from the wide range of guests and people that are on there. When I say simple but not easy, it's things like, look, we all want to be rich, we all want to have the maybe perfect body shape. But if it was that easy, we'd all be millionaires with six packs or the perfect beach body or whatever analogy you want to use. But it's the practice, the compassion, the making mistakes that we go through to understand, okay, what's that uncovering about us? So when he first talked about the inauthenticity of it, it's like, well, as a goal or aim in life, you're all like, yeah, we want to be peaceful and not get into arguments and judge other people, but our behaviour say otherwise, because it's that easy to do. And one first thing to meet in that regard, as we said, was acceptance.
Yeah.
We're not, the more we try and stem back these natural things that come to us, the more they'll just pop up again when we don't want them to. And it's not about the idea of, right, we're going to get rid of ever reacting. So by saying we accept what we feel, that we're never going to judge others again, no, we're not saying that. There will be a point where you will just judge someone out of sheer emotion, which is okay. That's the practice we're trying to get of, like, okay, what's it actually telling us, so that we can uncover clues about ourselves. Just this very morning, I wrote to somebody else that the clues we give ourselves, it's like being a good detective, like Columbo. He's amazing, Columbo. He would not ignore any clue that came across, however small it might be. It's like, what was that actually saying? And he uncovers a bit more of what was going on until he, solved it. And that's exactly what we're trying to do here.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think anyone that says that they don't react or don't judge or, these things don't happen is fibbing. I think we all have moments where our emotions take over, and that's not the problem. It's how you react to it. I mean, if you can put it in perspective and, not outburst from it and not, act on it, but actually internally think about it and think about what it means to you and why that reaction is happening. And actually then you grow. Rather than getting stressed and angry and all those things, you actually start to grow, because you start to learn things about yourself. You start to learn about your triggers. You start to learn about the things and, that you probably don't even realize that you can change in order to have a much smoother day to day.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
100%. And it also ties in the other perspective of take your own responsibility.
Yeah, definitely.
So, much of what came with judgment, I feel, is the idea of when we judge someone, there's actually a bit of jealousy involved. Now, some people go, what do you mean? I ain't jealous of them. I had that same example the other day. I was debating something with family, and I pointed out something to them, not saying, oh, you're jealous. Just like introducing the idea, saying, do you know what? The judgment you're making of other people might indicate some jealousy. And they're like, no, what are you talking about? It's like, what it is when we observe a behavior that we've experienced or have grown up or through programming experiences have been shown that that's not acceptable. So, like being envious or being jealous is unacceptable. Therefore, we should be virtuous. We should share. We should consider other people, this kind of thing. So we're like, right, it's not acceptable to be jealous. Now, when we see somebody else exhibiting behavior that makes us jealous, that's what irks us, saying, I'm trying so hard to suppress this natural feeling of jealousy or greed or whatever, yet you're wantonly displaying behavior that I'm repressing. So the jealousy comes from, how come you've got the freedom to exhibit your natural emotion freely, yet I'm not?
Yeah.
That's the clue.
Yeah, definitely. I agree. I think there was a lot in this podcast that really resonated hugely. I'd never heard of Dr. Demartini.
No, same.
And weirdly, I think Lewis genuinely had like a bit of a breakthrough in there as well. I think there's a tone in his voice that really changes when he's talking about. There was a bit in when he's talking about the father figure, and he's saying about that he's got a young woman that had been abused and her father hadn't been around. I think that's right, and that I mixed up the two. Have I mixed up the two? I don't know if I have. And he was saying that. And she'd been abused and her father hadn't been around and blah blah, and she was very like worries me, this has happened to me and it's really bad. And he was like, yeah, but what did you gain from that?
Yeah.
And I think the other moment was when he was saying about the father figure not being around, and actually the father figure not being around isn't a bad thing, because you will have got
So
other
much out of it, not
people,
the experience, but around it.
yeah, around it. And actually, you wasn't missing out on anything, because there were other people there that were giving that to you. It just wasn't coming from the person that society says it
Yeah.
should be coming from. And I think that kind of, I think that was a bit of a breakthrough for me, because my real dad hasn't been around. I've got an amazing, amazing dad, but my actual biological father hasn't really been around. And for a really long time, I was kind of really cross about that. And it's, I think it still like tugs a bit in my tummy, and it really is still a bit like, yeah, but it doesn't hold the same significance as what it used to, because actually I appreciate now as an adult that had what I went through not have happened, I wouldn't be who I am right now, and I am actually really quite comfortable in my own skin and with myself, and I am kind of grateful to it. So that like hugely, hugely resonated with me in a massive, massive way. And he just put it so much better than I could have ever. Like, and he says it, he says it with such conviction. And I'm sure that he's never not going to listen to what other people have to say, but he's not even prepared. You can tell in the statement when he says it, he's not even prepared to move on that statement ever so slightly. Absolutely not. No, that has happened to you, but you are amazing now because of it. So stop using it as a fucking excuse.
And that's something I think he repeated throughout. You know, cut the
Yeah,
bullshit, cut this. And I got to say, when I heard that, that sat a bit uneasy with me, because I get the perspective he's making, that he's forthright in what he's saying. He's not necessarily saying I'm going to convince you wrongly, but I guess he's trying to use almost that kind of snap out of it nature. Not to say though that anyone, you know, who's been through that kind of trauma is just, you know, employing what I call victim juice and that kind of mentality. But it's more about a case of, okay, that has happened, as you said, but
yeah,
on another perspective, what is it giving you? I think the example you were saying is, this is a lady who was able to outline a list of 32 benefits on the back of what happened to her.
yeah,
So, as I said, for people viewing or listening to the show, there is a link to the show that we're talking about in the description, so you can go check it out. But ultimately, in that, there was a snippet where someone was talking about their experience of sexual harassment as a child. And again, not downplaying that or saying it didn't happen or anything like that. But, you know, the question that was posed to them is saying, are you able to look at the benefits of what happened? You know,
yeah,
and they said things like, you know, I was able to finish college, move to a bigger city, make money, and also actually utilize their sexuality to gain favor and that kind of thing.
yeah,
But going back to the original incident, they dug into it further, and you know, something I've learned about a lot is going deeper, you know, than the surface level. You know, keep digging until you find it, because that's where your answers are. And you know, she was able to say in the interaction that this guy gave her a feeling of being special.
yeah,
Now, again, you know, there is a fine balance between, you know, what is special and what is, you know, going into, you know, the darker side of things. But
absolutely.
she mentioned that, you know, her parents weren't around when the guy started giving attention. She didn't necessarily fight back against him. And I guess you could view that as a sense of you're meeting your core human needs
Yeah,
of, you know, connection to others, significance and ego. But ultimately what she's not done so far is give herself credit for finding that survival mechanism that's worked for her. Now again, those terms like survival mechanism and meeting needs, you know, might strike a lot of controversy in people going, hang on, this sounds like a very suspicious, dodgy case. And yeah, look, we don't know the people intimately and know the stuff, but we're just going on what was shared. But
yeah,
that's perspective or way we can use whatever incident we've got in our lives in the very same way. We can distill it down to, what is this behavior, feeling, state, emotion? What needs are they meeting? We've all got 4 core human needs. Things like certainty, variety, significance, connection, and love. So it's like,
yeah,
well, which ones are they meeting? And it could be or will be that our behaviors that are automatic aren't being met in healthy ways. But the way, as you say, he expressed the almost a kind of bold approach of like, no, snap out of it. What about this? Because sometimes people are shying away, going, "Oh, this was just terrible." You know, absolutely nothing happened like good out of it. But when you
yeah,
go, Really, is that true? Are you kidding yourself? What else could it be? Again, we're not trying to downplay what originally happened. It's finding that balance to work out, actually, even in the worst circumstances or things, you can find a way through.
And it's about changing perspective.
Yeah.
So it's like, do you want to live the rest of your life with this victim mentality?
Yeah.
Step away from that. Okay, no one's saying that what happened isn't shit and it should never have happened. But actually, do you want to spend any more of your life, which is short and precious, or should we look at what actually, as an adult, that gave you that maybe you wouldn't have had otherwise, and focus on the adversity, on the asset rather than the adversity, which is obviously what Lewis's podcasts are about. And I think out of all of his podcasts, this one is incredibly that. Do you know what I mean? I think everything he talks about is just defines that, you know, and
yeah,
it just a lot of it resonated with me massively.
The one thing I added on top of that, and it's something I think mentioned towards the end of the show, was the idea that he mentioned a soundbite, again, didn't quite click with me, because he said, I'm not interested in having compassion. Now, when we're talking about experiences that people find difficult to broach, you know, something that's happened in their life and they've been, you know, through a lot. And yeah, the idea is that we're trying to get them to see other possibilities.
Right.
As we said, the benefits, etc.
Yeah.
Having compassion to that, for me, is almost fundamental. Because where we're coming from at the moment is we're after this experience, we're repeating behaviours and thoughts and patterns that we're not good enough. So essentially, we're chipping away at our own self-worth. Yeah. Because of we either put the blame on ourselves, we exacerbate it by avoiding those scenarios because we're in default self-protection mode. But when he said, I'm not interested in having that, I'm like, well, hang on. If we don't start the messaging that, you know, being kind to yourself, again, not suppressing or avoiding or forgetting that happened, but it's just like, well, if we continue that kind of language to ourselves of we're not good enough, then how can we hope to move forward?
Yeah. Say it again. Say the
So
sentence.
he mentioned, I'm not interested in having compassion. And I literally wrote those words down because that's...
See, it's good. I think this is why these things are really good to talk about, because I got a lot out of that podcast, but I didn't hear that. I didn't hear that like that. I heard it, obviously. I think I listened to the podcast again this morning. And I listened to it. I've been up working since 4:30 this morning, so I know I had a really busy day today. So I listened to it this morning, and I listened to it a few days ago. I think I probably listened to this podcast about 3 or 4 times, and I actually have listened to it, properly listened to it, but I don't recall hearing that sentence how you heard it.
And again, you know, as you said, I could listen to it again and hear it in another context.
Yeah.
But as we said, it's not about what was said, it's about what you heard. Now, in the middle of all these examples, as you said, of walking people through the possibilities and benefits of what happened, even though they might sound counterintuitive at first, the bit that, you know, the bit that was added on that I heard at that time was like, oh, hang on, not having compassion. No, hold on. It's got to start with compassion. Not to say that we, as I said, you know, I keep mentioning this, the idea of striking a balance. It's not about just going to the other end, oh, you know, it'll be all right and this kind of thing. We go beyond that fluff.
Yeah.
It's about going, well, the compassion starts with, you've been through what you've been through. That's okay. Those moments might still come up, but they're okay. That to me is the hint of compassion. So when he said that, I'm like, okay, hold on. I get a lot of that, but what you said, but that bit, not quite sure on that one.
Yeah. I'm not interested in compassion. I'm not interested in compassion.
In having compassion, I've written down.
But is that he's not interested in people being compassionate towards him because he doesn't feel that he needs it?
I'd probably have to listen to it again to make sure, but I got it at that time. I think in the sense of when he's speaking to somebody in that similar example, this is when he's having an interaction to say, you know, I'm not going to focus on just that fluff side or the compassion or the basically you giving me your story again. Because I think elsewhere you mentioned about stories end when you tell it. So if you tell your story about whatever happened or your challenge goal, whatever it might be, in that session, that's where it ends. We don't talk about it anymore. We don't revisit it, because once you've told it, I'm not interested in going back to it. Because now he's like, right, what can we do about it? Because I think he was come from the perspective of the stories are something you've told yourself. And indeed, you know, again, something I've learned in my journey, that a lot of our life, in fact, all of our life, is the stories we tell ourselves.
Yeah.
A lot of things are kidology, convincing ourselves, protecting ourselves, all in a manner of stories.
Yeah.
And we have the ability to change our own stories.
Well, we do frequently, and Chinese whispers is the perfect example of that. I mean, you don't. Yeah, I'm pretty sure that some of the stories that are in my brain from my childhood are certainly probably not how they were actually at the time. They've just, you know, they just grow with time, and memories change, and they become faded. And actually, I think every time you tell a story, maybe you change it a little bit. And I wonder how far you are from the real story by the time you're, and let's face it, as we get older, our memory goes slightly. I mean, I can't remember why I walked into the kitchen half the time. So, you know, it makes you wonder, doesn't it, how much of what we tell ourselves that's happened to us in our childhood, or these, you know, these stories that are in our brain that have shaped us as adults, are actually how close they are to actually what really happened.
100%. And, you know, we're going deeper into the, you know, space of neurology and this kind of thing, people talk about the subconscious and the brain having active filters to filter those impulses that come into us, because everything we experience through our senses are just electrical signals. Our subconscious has a filter system to go, right, is this going to harm this being because I'm in self-protection mode, because I've got to make sure you don't die. So it's like, if that memory is harmful, then it will repress it down. But at some point it will bring it up to go, there's unresolved shit here, do you want to do anything about it? And you're like, no, I'll put that away. And we put it away again. So it's all intertwined with how we tell each other. And as I said, a lot of the times we do embellish stories, make excuses, tell long tales to, again, boils down to the core need of significance. You know, when you tell a story, people listen to you and you feel heard.
Yeah.
But, you know, I guess what Dr. Demartini in his episode was trying to enforce the point is, that's all well and good, but I want to very quickly get through that. My time together with you, if we're working, is not about you just telling stories and employing that victim mentality or blame culture. It's like, right, tell it, move.
Yeah.
And that was the kind of, I think, sort of forthright attitude he was having throughout, of, you know, and that's why I think his examples were quite stark in that, saying, you know, even those really difficult to hear examples, even stuff comes out of that. So, you know, another angle where it was very profound, I think.
I found agree totally. I don't know. I'm still. I think I have literally listened to it about 5 times, and I'm finding new little bits in it.
That was, as with any good episode of anything, right? You watch it again, you're like, oh yeah, it's that bit I missed. And
the notes that I've written are completely different to the notes that you've written.
Probably.
And it goes absolutely to show that people hear different things, and it's not just about the words that are spoken, it's the tone of voice, it's the feeling you get from what's being told. It's amazing how two people can listen to exactly the same thing and have such opposing opinions on what's been said and their meanings. And I think this is why I wanted to do this, because I know what I heard and I know the things that resonated with me, but I don't think I've ever quite been in a situation like this before, where I've listened to something that's really profound and had someone to discuss it with, that, you know, like, to bounce off.
That's what I personally find that's what the best shows that I consume are about. You know, many of the podcasts I listen to are from the music and sport angle, but when they're people that you enjoy listening to from previous experiences, or the breadth of their knowledge or tone, as you say, it's like, right, you just have to see the title or people and go, I'm listening to that. It can be whatever subject, but you know that these are the people I want to listen to. Why? Because they might resonate with you. As you said, we may introduce elements of confirmation bias, so you know, there's that involved, but it's the language of people, the tone, etc. And the beauty of what you said is we can apply this not to just podcasts, but we can apply it to our lives, even to things like, you know, tastes or matters of opinion. You know, we often clash with people, I should say, on my opinion's right, your opinion isn't. And we put our self-worth to ransom within that.
Yeah.
And the way we can stem ourselves is going, okay, do you know what? I employ this technique called maybe you're right, which we'll probably go into another time.
Yeah.
But coming back to this podcast, I just wanted to ask you, though, do you remember a point where he said, nothing is missing, it's only perceived to be missing?
Yes. So this
What do
is
you
where,
think?
yeah, I agree. And it really actually got me thinking, and probably in the nick of time, and I'll explain why in a second. So yeah, I do agree, because, as I said, I felt really bitter towards the fact that my biological father wasn't really ever around, and me and my half sister, who I love dearly, she used to talk about our dad, and I used to say to her, we've got different dads," and she'd be like, "Well, what do you mean?" And I'd be like, "Well, he does not treat me like he treats you. Therefore, he might be the same man, but we do not have the same dad." Now, I've spent quite a lot of time not feeling bitter, but just feeling like a sense of, well, why didn't I have that? But actually, I have had that, because my mum married my dad, an amazing man, when I was 12. And actually, I've probably had better than I would have had. And actually, I haven't missed out on anything. It has been exactly there what I needed. And I've been so focused on the fact that society says that my biological father should be the person that gives me that care, that I've almost negated to recognise the fact that there has been a man in my life that has been giving me everything that I've needed and more. And actually, it means twice as much, because he isn't my biological father and he hasn't had to. He's done it because he wanted to. And I probably wouldn't have got that level of care and love if it had come from my biological father. And that hit me, because it hit me, and almost instantaneously, everything about how I thought about that situation changed in me from that podcast.
An
And
oh fuck moment.
It was a massive oh fuck moment. And that doesn't mean to say that I don't appreciate my dad, because I do, and I love him, and I tell him I appreciate him, and I know how much of an amazing man he is. But actually, I still held on to that little bit of internal regret of what if. But that has gone, and it's gone in the nick of time, because my biological father's sister, out of the blue, messaged me on Facebook last night, and I haven't heard from her in 15 years, basically saying, "Oh, how are you? Don't be a stranger." And I just thought, it did give me a little bit of a knot in my stomach, I'm not going to lie, but that's because of previous history of them
something's coming out of your shadow.
Yeah, dipping in and out of my life when it suits them. And as soon as my life gets difficult because of my mental health, they all go, "We don't want anything more to do with you. Off you go, because you're erratic and you're emotional." I told her that I was bipolar, and she went, "Oh, I'm really sorry." Don't be sorry. Half my battle was finding out what was wrong, and the rest of my life is pretty good right now. I've got like a thriving little business. I've got 2 beautiful dogs. I've got a lovely house. Please don't be sorry. I wasn't telling you because of that. You asked me how I was, and I'm telling you what I've been through. And I think this podcast in particular made that much of a difference to me, that it completely changed how this whole situation with her and my biological father have impacted me, and would have considered. I mean, it caught me off guard. I was in the middle of a Zoom call last night, and you could absolutely see the look on my face.
Well, to you, yeah.
Yeah, like I had to log out. I had to go. I've got to go, because I couldn't. My brain just went. And it took me a minute, but I did compose myself, and I really thought back to that podcast, and it's massively made a difference. I mean, it made such a difference, I've not even mentioned it to my mum, whereas normally I'd be like, because I ring my mum and dad every morning and when I'm out walking, and I talk to them as I go off, and we have about 20 minutes in the morning where we chat, and then I video time them later. But I've not even mentioned it to her, and not because I'm not mentioning it, but because actually it's not impacted me that much, that it's been in the forefront of my mind. when I've spoken to her this morning, which is amazing for me. It's a massive breakthrough. It's not even just an old fuck moment. It's like a moment of momentous magnitude that it's taken me 46 years to get to. And in a 1 hour and 11-minute podcast, I had the biggest breakthrough I've ever had in my entire adult life. So that's why I picked this one, because it really has been massive for me. Huge.
That's really well put. I mean, as you said, we don't know what we'll be inspired from when we do click play on the podcast. We know we'll probably enjoy it because, as I said, of the people involved or the subject. But that's the beauty of this medium in particular, where you could be absentmindedly doing something else or anything, and then they start to tell a story or a line that grabs your ear, and you're like, okay, and you work your way through it, and then it's like, okay, wow. Yeah, as you say, gives you an action point or a new perspective or realization. And I guess that's part of the ethos of this podcast, you say, to give more of those interpretations, perspectives, expressions out there. And again, we're not telling people to go think like we do or agree with Angie or agree with me or whoever it might be. It's like, this is the beauty of being able to share, as you say, because going to the point we said earlier, that when you find someone of the same ilk to discuss with, because often you might watch a podcast and go, well, I want to do that, I want to get involved, not just comment or something, but have that kind of active chat, because of the idea that, as you said, I'm coming with one perspective, somebody might have a different one, and the two we don't have to agree with each other. We could have completely different opposite perspectives, but when we can have a medium like this, it's really cool.
Yeah, definitely. I think out of all of the podcasts, this one resonated absolutely incredibly, like hugely.
So what did you make of when he said, or the question was put to him by Lewis, of how do we convince skeptical people? Because I guess we open the show by saying that you might hear a lot of stuff or language on these shows that go, really, I don't know, fuck that, I've heard that before, that's just hippie mumbo jumbo or whatever. And I was really interested in his initial answer, because again, it was like, okay, you could just stop there. That was quite impactful, because he answered Dr. Demartini, sorry. He answered it by going, to the question, how do you convince the skeptics? You don't. It's not up to us.
No. Do you know what? I agree with that. I think that there's no point trying to convince someone that doesn't want to be convinced. And I will absolutely, and that is actually a practice that I put into place quite a long time ago, because I'm the kind of person who wants to help everybody. I really see somebody struggling and suffering, and I want to impart all my wisdom. And sometimes that comes across as hijacking a conversation, which admittedly it does, but that's never the intention. The intention is that I want to tell you what I've been through, because I want to convince you that there is a better way. But if you're not ready to hear it, and I've got to try and convince you, then I learned a really long time ago to walk away from that, but leave the door open, because otherwise I'm just going to get frustrated, and then I'm undoing all my really good work by trying to convince someone else that isn't ready to hear it and doesn't want to be convinced. So I fully agree with that. I think there's enough information out there about situations that if people really want to make a difference and people really want to make a change, they can go out and find it without having it rammed down their throat, because that certainly won't come from me.
Well, it's it. Take your own responsibility. I think it ties that point back in of like, often I heard in my journey that, especially my coach, like, you don't have to absorb everything you listen to. It's like you can take a little bit from here, you can take a little bit from there. It's what resonates with you. And in fact, I'm just reading his original response in full, right? Because he then went on to quote, "To those who believe, no proof is necessary. To those who don't, no proof is possible." Now again, I didn't quite agree with that phrasing, because to me that implies you might just need belief. Whereas even, in my life, again, probably another podcast time, but as a supporter of a football club, belief is something that's spoken about a lot. But sometimes you need that tangible proof whether it's from past experiences, current experiences, to believe what you're believing in essentially is correct or the way forward. But what resonated with me better, I know you're dying to jump in, but I'll just finish this point, right? What resonated with me more is the bit he said afterwards is, and that's actually what a summary of what you just said is, waste no words on those who seek not.
Yeah. I think for me, if you can be convinced, you were already way over the fence anyway. And that actually it's not that you want convincing, it's more that you need reassurance. And I think
Yeah,
reassurance
that's a
is
good point.
different
That's
than
what good.
convincing.
That's good phrasing.
I think that if you can be swayed by somebody else's thoughts, opinions, and experiences, you've already jumped over the fence and you're already on the side you want to be on. You just need confirmation and reassurance. I think if you're truly sitting on the fence, no one's going to tip you either way until you've made that decision. It's like when people come to me and go, I don't know what to do, should I do A or B? And I'm like, right, flip a coin. And if you get A but you wanted B, you'll be disappointed, and then you know. And if you get A and you're happy, you know that that's what you want.
Oh,
So
very good.
yeah, so genuinely I think if you can be convinced, you've already made a decision. You just need reassurance. And if you're trying to convince someone and they won't budge, just leave them to it. Eventually they'll fall in either one direction or the other, but they probably won't be happy. And actually it's probably a lack of knowledge, the reason that they're sitting on the fence.
I like that. And a natural extension that I got as well from that was that when it comes to our own changes, we started with the idea of acceptance, but I also say that in terms of a trait, or a couple of traits I should say, I say it starts with courage and want, because to make the changes that you're asking for is actually asking you to be a bit more courageous than you might initially think. Because as we said, we tend to sometimes phrase what we want in two ways. First, we say, I don't want X. Now, like we said before, our brain doesn't compute negatives. So if you say, I don't want to be fat, your brain goes, you must want to be fat then, because I don't know what don't means.
Yeah.
So, you're right to do that. Or you phrase something like, I want to be rich. I want to win the lottery. I want a massive a goal. And it's like, well, okay, what does that look like? I don't know. And the minute it might get a bit too hard, you're like, oh, fuck it. No, I'm never going to get there. And this and that and the other. Yeah, you can't be asked. So you've got to have the courage to go, okay, look at the answers deep inside. Sometimes we say what we want, but it's not what we actually want.
No, I agree.
This isn't some like matrix trippy idea. It's more like, it's just to ask yourself, do you actually want what you want, or is it because somebody else wants that for you? So you've got to have the want. And then when you couple that with the courage, it's like, to find the answers, you have to, may have to go to some dark places. I saw a quote the other day from another a book, I think it was, the treasure you seek is in the darkest cave that you don't want to go into. Well, I'll paraphrase that somewhat, but when I heard that phrasing from the show, it's like those two elements of courage and want came up. Because I was saying, if somebody doesn't want to change, then no amount of proof would work.
It's going to make them. Exactly, that's the thing, isn't it? It's you can't you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make it drink, and it is. I completely agree with Dr. Demartini on that. I think if somebody, there's no point trying to convince somebody to do something. They've either already made up their mind and they just need reassurance, or they're not going to budge. And I do agree. I tell you what I would like to talk about, and something that I'm quite passionate about on this podcast is his Dr. Demartini's childhood. And,
yes. Okay.
Lewis likening it to Forrest Gump.
Yeah, with his like braces, right?
I do a little cleaning job, and just to get me out of the house, because otherwise I wouldn't leave. And when I'm doing my little cleaning job, I put my headphones in and I listen to podcasts, because it's like an hour and a half of cardio workout and meditation for me, or learning. And I've not got the dogs around, I'm not in my office, no one's ringing me because they know that I'm busy for an hour and a half, and it's like an hour and a half for me. It's great. And that did make me chuckle, but also it really, really, I am absolutely passionate that our education system is flawed. And this whole conversation, and please go and listen to it, and I know we keep saying this, but the link is in the comments below or above, I'm not sure where it's going to be, but they're going to be there. he said that his primary school teacher, which is I don't know what I can't remember what it's called in America, but his
Elementary school, isn't it?
elementary school, yeah, his elementary school teacher said that he would never be able to read and he would
Yeah.
never be able to write, and he was never going to amount to anything. And he's one. I think he is the world's leading. He's read more books, like 3,500 books or something, isn't he? It's loads and loads, which is impressive in itself. But I feel very passionately, and I got onto this subject with the lady that I did the other podcast with. I feel very passionately that our education system does not work. I think that we group people that we group our new humans that are learning into age groups, regardless of how they learn, how advanced they are, what they're good at, and actually work to their strengths and weaknesses. We just assume that, okay, you're 12, you're going to learn exactly the same as every other 12-year-old, and we're not even going to look at how you learn best. And if you can't keep you interested, then we're going to call you a troublemaker and kick you out of school.
It's a factory.
Instead of finding a better way. It absolutely is one of the things. I remember getting called into school when my son was young and being told that we think he's got issues with learning, and me going, right, no, hold on a second, time out. He hasn't got issues with learning. He's just not interested in the way that you are teaching him. Do your jobs and figure out how best to teach my son. And if that isn't exactly the same as all the other children, don't put us to one side and say that and actually we were right. There was nothing wrong with him. He was just bored because it wasn't working the way that I need to write stuff down. For it to stay in my brain, I have to put pen to paper. Typing's all right, but it's not the same as writing it down. It's like my fingers go directly into the part of my brain that makes
That's exactly there's studies on that. Writing, the physical form of writing, reinforces the connection between your brain and your writing hand.
So I need to write stuff down, which meant that during school, sitting watching a teacher talking at me constantly and not being allowed to put your pen down, what you're doing when I'm taking notes. Well, no, you should be listening. But actually, I listen better.
That's what I'm saying. I am listening by taking notes.
Yeah, I listen better. It's the opposite of when my mum used to say, I need to turn the radio down so I can concentrate and drive. Do you know, all these little things that we do that heighten another sense, for me, and school just doesn't do that. And we don't even teach the right things. How do we learn about managing our money and
exactly. I was exactly going to say that
we need. And I think Dr. Demartini is the absolute pinnacle of an example of how wrong they fucking got it. Simply, just so wrong.
Even as you said, unless you did economics at GCSE or A level, most school leavers, at whatever point they leave the education system, won't have an idea of what's a mortgage rate, what's a fixed rate, what's an exchange rate, what's a savings account, what's tax mean, where does my bloody money go? Now people go, yeah, but you just pick that up along the way. Well, not everybody's got the same access to that kind of knowledge or experience. The people say just learn off your parents. As I said, not everybody's got that equal means to do it. Where we do have the means to get that equal information is when we're all together at school, for example. But even away from like economics lessons, what about things like emotional development, social lessons? Now again, people are going, fuck that, that's airy fairy shite, isn't it? But I remember, we're talking late 90s. We had 1 hour a week, which they called, what was it? The acronym was PSHE, so it was something like personal, social, health education or something like that. One week could be about sex education, one week could be about, I don't even know half the time. Like, it was just 1 hour. And then you wonder why people then, don't have an idea when they leave school again about emotional development. Because obviously you leave school at an emotional, an age where, a lot of emotions and things are going on. You're a teenager. There's all sorts of, things happening in your space. So you leave without being, as you said, armed with anything.
When I was at school, the girls did cooking, home economics.
That's it. Yeah, going back in further, yeah.
The boys did woodwork. and well, it is quite a bit further, to be honest. And it was very divided, and there was no economics. There was none of that. And I mean, obviously, education's come on a little bit since then, but it's still, education is still based on a system that was invented God knows how long ago. It has never been changed, and we live in a really different world now to what we used to do. And there isn't. I was saying to Zara in my previous podcast, which we were talking about neurodivergent children and in the education system. And actually, it is incredibly common now to have probably 3 or 4 children in a class that are neurodivergent.
Yeah.
But it's still not catered for. It's still not considered an everyday thing. Why? Because it doesn't make any. I think across the board, the education system is just failing our children. We need much more emotional support and better tools to handle the gravity of life now with social media and all. It's just yes.
Well, one thing that came up from that podcast on that point was when he talked about. Do you remember the history test? Where the results of he revised for ages, and they put the results up on a board, and he was looking towards the top for his name, and it was at the bottom. He got like, I think the rest of the class averaged 60, 70. He got like 27, I think, and then he ran off crying.
Yeah.
Because and I thought that very practice itself is literally liken it to like, here's all your self-worth pinned on the board for everybody to see. Yeah. Not like, I remember, when we got my when I got my GCSE results and A-level results at school, they gave them to you in an envelope.
Yeah.
And you chose to either stay there and open them with your mates or go home. I would always go home and open them, not for fear of what was in there, or because I was pretty confident what I'd get. But it's just the whole, why make a show out of it? Because let's say it didn't go right. It's like there is a part of you going, wait, why am I why is my self-worth being put up like this? So whenever I counter a system that like goes, right, here's all your efforts put up for everyone to see. Now, most of us would not have done the work at that point to go, you know what, it doesn't matter what I share. Like if I got X in a test, fuck it doesn't matter. Yeah. Not in a flippant, non-caring way, but more kind of like my self-worth is not in that test result. But the fact that he went like, I did all that work and I never amount to anything, and repeated all that stuff about I never he repeated what his elementary school teacher said to him: you'll never read, you'll never write, you'll never amount to do anything. And then he got that emotional support from his mum, which I thought was a really touching point that he went on in to talk about after.
Got quite emotional a few times.
He did, didn't he? He really did. He really did choke up, right? He really did. But I just thought, like, one example in my space that I've seen recently is really, really cool. Is one of my cousins, his daughter, she just graduated from A-levels. So, if you're listening to a non-UK country, that's like high school, college, that kind of thing. And, instead of taking the tried and tested route of going to university for a degree, she's now doing an apprenticeship in computing. And when we all first heard that, it was so interesting to see all the reactions from everybody, because they didn't announce it like some big, affair, but like, when we all got together, it's like, oh, she's off to do this apprenticeship. And suddenly you just hear that word, apprenticeship, and everyone's like, what? Not a degree? What's going on? It's like, when you've learned more about it, it's like, no, she's really good at like coding and like, interested in it. She thinks she'll do well. I'm like, that's exactly it. Brilliant. Great for her. She's able to do something she enjoys and that she's good at. That should be it, really.
Yeah.
But people are like, what am I going to earn out of it? Fuck that. Not to say never think about it. Of course, there's certain decisions you might need to make. Not like if you want to be a doctor, you got to have all the complementary A-levels and education credentials, etc. Yeah. But just boil it down to, right, you as a person, what do you enjoy? And then what do you think you'll be good at? Just start with that.
And don't listen to what the education tells you. The education system tells you what you're good at. Go out there and discover it for yourself. Because if Dr. Demartini had listened to what they told him he wasn't good at, and he hadn't have had that experience with those scores being right down there, then he wouldn't be where he is today, and he wouldn't be probably the most well-read person out there doing what he does. So yeah, I think it's interesting that you brought that up, because I think Dr. Demartini would say to you that he sees it as a good thing. It was emotional. time. But
100%.
he's glad it happened because it made him who he is. Because without that experience, he would never have done what he did. What was it? What was it he said? He learned 30 words a day
The
every
dictionary, yeah, that was really good, wasn't it? He got his
and he
mum to test him and this kind of thing.
learn how to spell them, learn how to say them, and how to use them in a sentence. And he
Yeah,
did that.
yeah, literally like a spelling bee, right? And is that literally just going through a dictionary to improve the vocabulary? And you're right to say, those examples you use is like, if you hadn't done anything about it, that it could have been a checkpoint moment that got him stuck. And
Yeah.
I'm from a culture that is so shrouded in that educational safety. I
Yeah.
don't know if you remember, there was a sketch show in the UK called Goodness Gracious Me.
I do
Uh,
remember.
yeah, for those not familiar, it's a British Asian sketch show in the UK that ran in like the late 90s. But there's a great sketch in there. You'll find it on YouTube. There's a couple, and they get their son's A level results, and the mum is like, "Oh, you got got A here, and like got 3 A's," and then his dad's like, let me see. He goes, English A, mathematics A, English A. He's like, and the mum's like, what is this? He goes, he got a B. And he's like, he got a B. He's going to disgrace me. Like, he goes on, like, he's going to disgrace me in front of the community, and he's not going to do this, not going to. And every time the mum debunks, like, the point he's saying, I told him to do a PhD. And she's like, you can't do a PhD without a degree. And he's like, he should have done his degree in his spare time, but too busy playing football. At the end, the joke is that their son is 6 years old. But it just sort of like the one, if they encounter a blip, like that, like a test result, or like, why didn't you get 100, or why did you get it? It's like the self-worth is just like, and as an adult we can look back on it and laugh, because might have had that. And indeed, just to wrap up on that example, my coach had a similar example. He said, once I was quite a good at maths when I was a kid, enjoyed it and this kind of thing. I got 95% in a test. I came home, told my mum. She's like, oh, brilliant, 95%, well done, tell your dad. And then he went and told his dad, I got 95%. And his dad, with kind of a half a smile on his face, looked at him and said, well, I'm to the other 5%. And he goes, that's when that traumatic / programming experience shut down in my brain. I just ended it there going, he doesn't think I'm good enough. I didn't get 100%, and that's where it stuck. But he goes, when I revisit that, I can go beyond that ending to go, actually, he just said, no, I'm only kidding, well done. And they're probably like, had a ice cream or something to celebrate. But that's, come back to the point we tied up earlier, that it's all about the stories we tell ourselves, and that there's something beyond it, and not everything has to be this big dramatic shit or ending. It's like you can dig beyond it and go, actually, I can revisit it, I can look at a new perspective.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, look, I think there's so much in this podcast, and I think what time are we on, just out of curiosity?
We're coming up to the hour.
We are. There's so much more I would love to discuss from this, but I'm very aware that I was sensing that it was about that time. But it's definitely there's definitely a lot in this podcast. I don't think another hour we could probably cover it all, because obviously there's a story about a guy that shot his best friend. There's a story about how you lose accountability in your own life when you get infatuated by someone. And oh my God, I've got a story about that. Do you know what I mean? There's so much in this podcast. It could probably do with being revisited at some point.
Absolutely. And as we said before, that's the beauty of it. Sometimes you'll hear something and you get a completely different meaning out of it. So you'll hear something that you missed the first time and this kind of thing. And that's, the beauty of us putting it in a format like this, that we want to get your views in it. The viewer, the listener, feel free to share your perspectives, comments, stuff in the, comments places below, wherever you're reading or watching this, because, it'd be interesting to see what other perspectives and that are out there. That's, the way we can build engagement stuff on this show. And, indeed, if you think of, even podcasts to suggest that we could cover on the show or anything like that, we'd love to hear from you. Chip in, and the more interactive we can make this, the better. As Ange pointed out, we could rattle on for ages about a certain show or whatever. But look, the more we can get you guys involved, let's have it.
And I think next time it's your turn. I chose this podcast, so it's your choice.
It is, yeah. I've got a good one in mind. It's someone that.
It's going to be a back cricket.
Say again.
It's going to be a back cricket.
No, it's not. It's it is a well, do you know what? I won't mention it now. I'll leave it for next time. So tune in next time to see what I bring to the table.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you for your views. Totally different from mine, which I'm glad. I was expecting, and it made for a really good conversation. So, yeah. Until next time, we will catch you then.
As always, nice one. All right, catch you later.